Hello and welcome to today's episode of Mitten Backstage. Thanks so much for joining us today. I am happy to have sat down with Jay Gavan back in May. We chatted about his album A Public Thing, his life and career in the Michigan music scene, and other projects he's been involved in, other interests he has. He's a history teacher. He, has a lot of other things that he enjoys doing in and around music. So it was great to meet him through the podcast and chat about an album that I thought was really well done. It had a lot of thematic material lyrically and musically that kept recurring in new contexts, almost like an old prog rock concept album. So it was really cool to see that much attention and detail put into a record, and just to hear about what he does and what he's up to. If you liked today's episode and you want to support me and the podcasting efforts that I do, you can head on over to patreon.com/Snedeker. There you can contribute at different tier levels to unlock all sorts of things. I got merch, I got a newsletter, got some other things getting retooled going forward. So if you want to check that out, patreon.com/Snedeker. You can also go to DutchSnedeker.com to see everything else that I'm up to around the internet. I update, my discography of albums or singles I've been involved on as a recording artist. I have little landing pages for all the groups that I am currently active with, so you can check out a lot of different things. And it also links to all the other social platforms as well. And speaking of social platforms, don't underestimate your social currency. If you enjoyed any part of today's episode, feel free to like it, subscribe to a YouTube channel, follow me on Spotify. There's all sorts of ways to show your appreciation and engagement with the podcast, and it helps push the content out into the algorithm so more people can learn and benefit from these conversations. So appreciate that as well. All right, let's get right into today's episode with Jay Gavan.
Yeah, hey. How's it going?
Good. Good. How about you?
Good. It's
busy man.
Busy. Yeah, busy season.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a show at the Speakeasy Lounge with Earth Radio on Wednesday, and then we also played at Papa Pete's in Kalamazoo, and then we were supposed to play in Traverse City, but it was an outdoor venue, and they had all those storms, so we canceled the gig. And then last night I was in Holland for a wedding, so just driving around.
Getting to know Michigan real well.
Right.
Yep. That Gaylord storm was a surprise. My brothers and I are storm chasers. And
nice.
We're supposed to go actually this week, but we go out to the plains and there's nothing. It's snowing out there, so. And it's impossible to follow, the storms in Michigan are too unpredictable and hard to follow, and there's too many trees.
Right.
Plus, they tend to hit cities, which sucks.
Yeah, it's like you're trying to film it, and then, there's like buildings in the way. You're trying to, I don't know, navigate the chaos of people driving.
Right. And they're much better out on across a field, an endless field of grass or whatever. So yeah, right. So I drove by Papa Pete's Thursday and it looked really packed, but I was busy until like almost 9:45, and I didn't know who was playing. And then I saw like half the guys. What's the one dude, super tall dude from Saxquatch.
Oh yeah, Saxquatch, yeah.
I've forgotten it's Jared, right? Jared Selman.
Yeah, Jared.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I saw him standing outside, and but it looked busy. So I hope you had a good crowd.
Yeah, I was surprised because when we got there, obviously we're loading in early, but there was the only people there were the bar staff, and then there was like a kind of an informal, or maybe it was organized. It was like a pool tournament, so there were a bunch of people with their own custom pool cue cases, and and there was like 3 generations of participants. Like it looked like different families put it together. So we were like, is this going to be our audience? But then like right before doors, there was just like a wave of people who all came in, and was like, okay, there's, friends I went to school with at Western and, their friends, and it was great.
I did see you guys open for the go rounds at Bell's back in whenever their last show or last weekend of shows. So it was awesome. Loved it.
Yeah, it was great seeing, I'm used to Adam Danis behind the kit, so seeing him on guitar and singing with fake baseball was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that guy, I met him. He took a class from me back when he was an undergrad at Western, I think. So had to be like 15 years ago now.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, the connecting, it's funny, like, I keep telling people, like, the further you get into a music career, you just start meeting, like, friends of friends, or, like, all the people you hear about, you start to meet through, like, just, like, oh, we're on the same festival, or they want to book a show to get, it's like, there's a very, at least, especially what I've experienced in Michigan, there's a lot of, like, communal, just, like, uplifting of everybody. Like, you might put together a show where it's like, oh, we got a rock band, but we also have, like, this acoustic artist, or, I think the other day, my friend, Ben Kolk, who goes by Ben Travers, he does a lot of old time music, and he opened for Political Lizard, like an indie rock band. So it's like,
right.
Hey, did you expect to see, songs from the 1950s that, Pete Seeger performed, and, a band that wrote songs last year?
Right.
So
yeah, it's an eclectic state, for sure. Yeah, I think Kalamazoo, like, breeds a lot of that too, because of the different, like, music schools down here, and I'm sure Grand Rapids has, and up north there's the same kind of diversity, but it seems like a lot of people with, me included, having, like, sort of arms in different cookie jars musically.
Right, yeah. Well, and because my undergrad was at Grand Valley State, and I didn't really know, my prep for colleges was just like, where can I go that I don't have to really pay for it? Right. And because I went to Grand Rapids City High, and, a lot of the classes I took towards the end of my time there were AP classes. So I had a lot of credits that transferred, and then they had like a scholarship if you went to a Grand Rapids public school, and then, stipends and scholarships from the music department.
Right.
And I know Grand Valley's more education focused. They seem to have a lot of, like, private teachers, choir directors, band directors. But that was kind of the first opportunity where I started meeting more people. It was like, oh, there's people just as, like, excited about music as a career as I am. And,
right.
They're taking things seriously, but then also getting exposed to, like, the world beyond just what all I knew growing up was, like, studying classical music, and then jazz was kind of that, like, that guilty pleasure that's like, oh, my teacher's not teaching me this, but I want to learn it.
Gateway drug.
Yeah. So, it was cool having that school kind of surprise me with, I joined the new music ensemble, like a contemporary chamber group, and, I did a little bit of jazz study there, and, got to do a lot of accompanying work. I didn't really, see myself doing a lot of that, but I accompanied a lot of saxophones and string instruments, and it's interesting when, like, you take, I don't know, the initiative and just look around you of, like, okay, what are people doing? How can I contribute? Like, that, that goes way further than, trying to cut together the perfect video to try and, get someone to pay attention to you.
Right. Yeah, I think I remember, Mike Shimon, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Drummer. He and I played in a band for a long time, and I knew him when he just moved here, because he came here for school too. And so he was, like in his early 20s or whatever. And he, studied jazz and studied like Arabic drumming and was in all these diverse like, studies. But then he realized that he could work pretty much every day of the week if he could play, folk music. And, so like half the time you see that dude play, he's just like, playing along with some folk band or like simple rock stuff. And he's the most badass drummer on so many levels, and it like, but, having that, if that's what he was going to do, just stay a purist and do like, play the hand drums or whatever, he's going to work one day a week in Michigan and not every day. So I don't know if he's still that busy, but
right.
Definitely so in demand that it was hard to be in a band with him because he, let's look another 6 months out, and see if my calendar frees up.
Right. Well, and I think too of like, like if you're gonna go that route of like being super specialized, you either need to be like at such a high level that it's, like people want to hear that specialized thing, or I've met people, I'm blanking on her name. I think it's Soyun. I met an Erhu player. It's like a kind of the Korean, not a fiddle, but like it's one string and then they bow on the inside of the bow, and and there's different versions of it across different cultures, but she was the kind of the cultural ambassador studying in California for that instrument and that tradition. So she, she was playing a lot of contemporary music that people were arranging new works to add to the repertoire. At the same time, she was like, dressing in traditional garb and doing more traditional concerts, at school visits and clinics. So it's interesting when like players can be super flexible, but then you also see the people who are like, they're sitting on top of a pretty narrow, like, focus, but they're, still able to do a pretty well-rounded career.
Sure. Probably a lot of travel if you're going to do that,
Yeah.
Yeah. With that instrument, it's probably travel, international. But that would be sweet.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious with her setup, if the designation comes with any like, like state sponsorship or school sponsorship, or
right.
Even if it's just like covering flights and lodging or something, like being able to, I don't know, supplement the fact that she's representing the instrument and the culture at different events.
Sort of like being poet laureate, or, I know like a lot of other countries, it seems like, have musical ambassadors. Maybe that's what is. I don't know if does the U.S. have that to other places, like, or we just export so much music that we don't need to have. But I remember like who's the guy from Brazil who was they created government, Gilberto Gil.
Oh,
they made like a government position, or a what do you call it, like the Department of Music for Brazil, right. And he was like the head of it, so I'm sure he got a lot of government funding that way.
Yeah. Well, and I think too of like, jazz was such a big export, in the, early 20th century, just bands going overseas during the war, or like right. even nowadays, I still see a lot of like, friends that come out of school and they join the military bands, and they're doing a lot of that, kind of educative thing in different cultures, being like, hey, here's, you heard about jazz. Let's teach you a little bit about jazz.
Yeah. Right.
But
yeah, there's a few guys, bass players from around this part that are in the Air Force band, right? I'm forgetting their names, but one of the combos I play with, the Birdseed Salesmen, it's like a Django gypsy jazz combo, and we had sort of a Rolodex of bass players, and several of them have been suddenly unavailable because they got, accepted into the Air Force or the Navy band or whatever. So,
right.
That's your steps into the military are to join our band for a few minutes and play up martinis on the patio. So.
Right. Yeah, if you could perform at this level, you'll be perfect for cocktail hour at the wedding.
Right. Yeah, totally.
But you mentioned Gypsy Swing. Do you know the Djangophonic guys or like Third Coast Swing or any of those?
Not really. I've seen the names around, but I've been kind of a homebody everybody has the last few years, but even sort of leading into that, I used to do like the festival scene a lot more and kind of fell away from that probably over the last 5 or 6 years. And so, yeah, I haven't seen Djangophonic. What are they called? The Detroit. What are they?
Yeah.
There's
trying to think of their name too.
Hot Club of Detroit.
Oh, yes.
They are. I don't know if they're still together, but that band and that was more like probably 15 years ago. They were playing the Michigan scene a lot, and we brought them to Kalamazoo for a couple festivals, and they used to play at the Union. Like, the Union would hire them, and it'd be like a Tuesday night, and I'd go down there and sit front row, and there'd be like 10 other people there, 6 of whom are yakking over, trying to talk over the band, just drooling over those guys, and so I wanted to do something like that, but I'm not that kind of player at all. I'm more of like the rhythm guy. And so this, had a guy move to town to teach history at Western. And, I ended up playing with him. And he's got a little bit of that background. Also kind of a chicken picker too. Like,
oh yeah,
I think it's pretty close actually. The Texas chicken picking meets Django, like surprisingly they're
yeah. It's like you just sculpt the tones different.
Right. Yeah. The bends are a little less twang and a little more French somehow. I don't know.
Yeah. Right. Well, and it was funny. Like, I mean, I know Django Reinhardt. When I first started looking at jazz, he popped up as like, oh, this guitar player who developed this style and Lost Fingers, and you're like, wow. And then, where it really kind of stuck with me later on was I met this player. I took a lesson with him, seeing him in a band. His name's Emil Wurstler, and he lives in, I think he lives in, I know it's down south. I thought it was in Georgia, but he adapted a lot of those techniques in the, like he's endorsed by Paul Reed Smith, and he does, jazz and blues gigs. But where I first saw him was in metal bands, and he would incorporate a lot of those like windy, diminished lines with, this heavier genre. And it was really cool because it, that style, you work up your clean picking, and it's so crisp. And so to hear him play it on an electric, you're like, this guy's really, really good.
Eddie Van Halen, I think, did a lot of that. Like, probably of anybody I have encountered, he used more of those like similar lines that Django would have used, but they're so fast and they're so, he would use them while, leaning on his Floyd Rose, doing an octave drop, whatever. But it's really great stuff. I wish I could play. I've never been much of a soloist. And I never really studied music, so I never got that. Never had anyone, probably like you had somebody like, Dutcher, play your scales. Let me see that scale and that key, and you had to actually do that. Unfortunately, nobody ever, like I sat around learning songs by The Clash or whatever and could do that, could play those without having to learn the scales. And so sort of made it into adulthood without, and then it becomes really hard to like, to go back and like find that level of technique. So I can solo if I like learn the part or have a good idea, of what it is. But improvisational solo, no way. So I was really happy to, I love doing the, I can do that all day and do sometimes. And have somebody else do the heavy lifting,
Right.
It's actually, we've discovered at a few gigs, where like at the end of the gig, I'm sweating and sore. And the other two, Helen and Nathan are like, hey, let's play some more. And I'm like, I can't, it's exhausting. But much easier, technically than what they're doing. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, and it's cool to think about like, all those years that, because, when you're a kid, some kids are like, I hate adults, and other kids, like me, it was just like, I want to, like, what do I, like, how do I impress, or how do I, how do I win over a teacher? How do I, like, I want to, maybe just, I don't know, wanting to be liked as a kid, but the teacher I had going into high school, Avi Reichert, he's I think a bronze medalist in the Van Kleinberg competition from years ago. So he's, very high pedigree classical player. He teaches at Seoul University now in South Korea. I think he's been there probably 15 years at this point, and or getting close. And he, he had me competing. He had me, all my scale exercises were like, at a base level, starting warm up was, octave apart with both hands. And then you go up 2 octaves, and then you split for 2 octaves, come back for 2 octaves, up 2 octaves, down 4 octaves. And then you would repeat that a 10th apart and a 6th apart. So you'd put the third in the right hand and then in the left hand. And then after you did all of that, you did arpeggios, 2 octaves up, apart, together, up, down. And, I had to do probably at least 4 scales a week of just like you're going to do an easy one, a hard one, and then like pick whatever. So
you have to do that kind of stuff at competitions too?
Yeah.
Or just perform pieces?
Yeah. We were mainly just performing pieces. I used it. It was a great warm up, especially for, I only competed a handful of times because I didn't like the, the process of like going to a thing, feeling really nervous, and then hearing, a bunch of other people warming up who are just as good or better. And some of those, I competed with Rhapsody in Blue, and it, that was super fun, and it taught me a lot about how to learn giant pieces, practicing like memory points and being like, at any moment, he's just going to call out like, like memory point B, or if we numbered them, I can't remember, and then be like, okay, I got to jump to this measure, this part. Oh, okay, he wants, H. Okay, H is this part of the piece. It's like, sing it before you play it. It's like trying to engage different parts of the brain. And those competitions were like, high school up to college freshmen. So, competing with university students. And when he ended up leaving for the job in South Korea, I was in 10th grade. So there was just a couple years before I went to Grand Valley where I didn't have a teacher, but I was gigging and playing with a jazz combo that started as a solo and ensemble project.
Right.
And then, we just decided to keep playing, and bandmates were writing tunes, and it was just a fun, it was the rock band, but we were all jazz nerds.
That's my son is in that process right now. He's, he's plays every instrument pretty much, and he's doing drums in the Kalamazoo Youth Jazz Orchestra.
Oh yeah,
playing guitar and bass in the Academy of Rock. And then tuba in marching band, and then and he's super into that. And now he's playing in 3 or 4 bands outside of those, and including one with, I don't know if you know Lori Sims.
Oh yeah,
Western. Yep. Her son is a drummer, and they've got a band together. So that's how these these weird relationships and they're almost generational now, where I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that, but he's done the solo and ensemble thing with tuba. I've seen some of that, and seen the level of people who are doing the solo thing look like they're just deer in headlights, and he's luckily just done these quintet things, and he shows up and he's he doesn't care, and has fun, and
right.
But kids, man, it looks like they're really intense, and their parents look really intense, and it's a different level of music than I ever experienced. It's never any competition, except for maybe the terrible battle of the bands, where some other band's parents put more money in the, bought more votes or whatever. So,
right.
Are we doing the interview right now?
Yeah. It's very organic. I usually do the intro and outro separate, just because it's easier for me. But yeah, I appreciate that, all the flexibility with my schedule and having to change things.
Oh man, no worry. I don't know if you heard, I teach history at KVCC, and they got for ransom. What is that called? Their website. A cyber attack, and so their website's been down since Monday, and I can't do anything. We had just started the summer semester, and my classes are all online classes, and I didn't even print out my students' names or contact info. It's all in the KVCC website. So I basically have had the last week off. Not that I had to be anywhere anyway, but I haven't had to do any grading. I can't do anything. So so every time it's hey, can we move this? I'm let me flip through my calendar and see all the nothing there, and sure, whenever.
Right.
Yeah, today's actually the busiest day I've had in a week. I've got a couple things after this, but no problem. Thank you for agreeing to or having an interest in chatting with me. I love your podcast. I've been watching. I've seen not all of them, but maybe 4 or 5 different episodes of it. Cool.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Have a sense of how organic it can be.
Right. Yeah, there's been some, I think the episode I did with Steve Leaf. We used to work together at Founders Brewing. Yeah. And we've done some other, there's podcast stuff we've done that's been recorded that he's trying to package, and we're talking about doing some sort of live show again, because he's super funny, and we have a lot of shared interests, and we're both musicians. But that whole episode, I think we didn't talk about career or any anything even remotely related. It was just like us talking like we would backstage, just like, you know, about stuff we, you know, comedians or stuff we reference or, you know, just life. So that was kind of the idea with the podcast of like, you know, it's like you get so many, you see so many, you know, polished and packaged and edited versions of interviews with musicians. But there's not a lot of like, hey, just chatting like we would if we were at a show or, you know, ran into each other at a coffee shop. I don't know, but
yeah, that's for sure. I like that. Have you heard the Broken Record podcast?
I don't think so.
It's the who's the famous producer? Rick Rubin.
Oh, okay.
It's like Rick Rubin talking to usually people he's recorded with at some point. And yeah, that's pretty good. And seems pretty, I mean, he's really good at it. He's a good speaker, you know, and a good prompter, but some of those have seemed to go in places that you wouldn't expect, you know.
Right.
Just here, I'm hawking my new CD. Hawking my new CD. Right?
Yeah.
Not that anyone does CDs anymore, except me.
Yeah, we were talking about that the other day of like this weird thing where like, you know, and maybe it's because of, you know, the big box store culture, the Amazon instant gratification culture, you know, trying to do merch is an interesting thing where, you know, the people who have a diehard audience, they can make, you know, like a Radiohead. Like Radiohead can make very specific things that you're like, I didn't think I wanted that, but now I do. Or, you know, they do something that's kind of out of left field. But for the majority, it's like, you know, what are the other bands doing? They got shirts, they got CDs, they might have vinyl, but vinyl's back ordered right now. And it's like trying to, yeah, you're trying to just travel with a store and in hopes that it's like, do you like wearing things? Do you like listening to things? Do you like pins? Do you like stickers? Like what way do you like to show support? And what things can we provide that are valuable to you other than just, I mean, you know, the music's obviously the main part, but it's like, what other things can we, you know, icing on the cake type thing?
Yeah, that whole side of music has never made any sense to me. And that's why, you know, honestly, like why I still have a day job. I've always had a day job. I just never could do the marketing thing, like, and never think about it. Like, I think, you know, I was in a band in the 90s and one of the other guys in the band was really into this stuff. He wanted to have, like, we were called Mom Handy, and he would make, like, these great posters and, you know, little, like, one-off T-shirts that he'd design with, like, Sharpie, and he was into wacky packages and monster paraphernalia and all that stuff, and would, like, make these, you know, just all these things that he thought, you know, people at our shows would want, you know, but I would never, it never would occur to me, like, we're going to play music, like, you know, I think he was onto something then that, like, 20, 30 years from now, man, there's no other way you're going to have stuff to sell, you know. Yeah. And I still, like, I don't, even this CD that I made, you know, I haven't really, like, figured out how to sell that because I haven't been playing shows, you know. I've been a little bit slower to get back into it, I think, than a lot of other people. Like, I've been to a few shows, and I've had a few this month, actually. But, yeah, it just seems like as soon as the show started happening again, everybody had a bunch of them. Like, it must be like everybody was just ready to go and ready to book. And I just missed that, you know, wasn't quite ready. So, yeah, so I haven't, I need to get that side of things going. And I don't know, when I go out and play, I won't have anything but the music to sell. I went down some weird rabbit hole here. But yeah, there's a lot that people do, like just, I think I was listening to, I was listening to the interview with, was it Patty Pershela?
Oh yeah.
Might have been like one of the first ones you did in this series. And just hearing her talk about all the things she does, just like, wow, that's a full-time job. That's, or even like listening to you, and, I know that you do a lot of, other than when you take 2 months off here and there from social media, it sounds like you're busy, you're creating things and posting things all the time. And, that's, that seems, that's great, but it seems like so much for me, it's more of a slow burn.
Yeah, well, and I feel like the more I dig into that side of it, the more I see, the benefit of at least, however frequent you post or frequent you do things. It's like whatever the, setting the intention behind what you're making, and then setting the audience's expectation for like, realistically what they can expect, I think is important, because there's, especially with it's funny with how there was Vine, and Vine had like, 7-second clips, but then Vine kind of fell by the wayside, and a lot of those people moved to longer form content on YouTube and other platforms, and then streaming kind of became a thing where, it's like some people watch these streamers for 6 hours, just like, who has this kind of time, or they're watching it at work. And then now, TikTok has brought back the or Instagram too, like just the endless scrolling of like bite-sized content, and to try and like, like if I were to actually have a team to market this podcast, it would be like, all right, we're making the long form, and then we're, chunking out topics at like, 5 to 10 minute intervals, putting them up on a separate channel to add more to the algorithm, but then clipping stuff from those clips into tinier clips for TikTok, Instagram, whatever platforms you want to be active on. And, my computer, my laptop can't really run my video software anymore. And then my desktop is right on the cusp, because I built it back in like 2014, and a lot of the components are like, from 2017, especially with the GPU shortage, with all the crypto mining and stuff. But it's like, there's only so much. It's like, unless you have the team and the equipment and the resources, like it's impossible to do like, the thing that like people like Gary Vee are just like you need to post 40 pieces of content every day, and here's how. It's like, okay, I'll tell you how. You have a team, they follow you around, they film everything you do, they clip stuff out, package it, and then post it. Like that's how you do it.
Yeah, and I mean, who wants to be like followed around with a film crew? Really? But not me.
No.
certain kind of person that wants to do that.
Yeah, and it's funny too. Like, there's also, as much as people, setting audience expectations. A lot of what I view on a regular basis is YouTube stuff. Different content creators, different people, because I'm fascinated by like, like I think of something like the Game Grumps, for example. They're the premise of the show is like two dudes playing video games. They're not they're not esports, they're not high level, like super good multiplayer gamers. It's almost like a goofy podcast where video games happen to be the medium. And from that, 8 years ago, they've evolved as a company to, they hired more staff. They have, an indie video game development wing. They have a touring company that helps route tours in, arenas and theaters for other YouTubers and other, entertainers from the internet. They have, different live content that they do. They have an artist game show. They have like 3 different musical projects. Like they just have, and it all started with just 2 dudes on a couch and their friends helping edit videos and also making content with them. So it's interesting to see, like, like some people have really high level of production and animation and they know Adobe After Effects like the back of their hand. And then other people literally just have, like, they bought the webcam that they've been using for 8 years and they just have a rapport with their audience and that's all they need. They don't need a lot of, fancy set design or, flashy graphics. So it is interesting to see, like, like for these podcasts too, it's like, this is just my bedroom and I just have posters on the wall. And other times I'll be at Third Coast and it's a little bit, better audio or better lighting. But, over Zoom, it's like, how much better could it really get?
Sure.
And, setting that expectation too, that it's like, it's like I'm one person. I'm about to recruit a friend to help edit some things because I just need someone with a computer who knows how to sync audio and video and, like, place a couple graphics certain ways. So it's interesting where we're at with content, where it's, or, content being creative works where you can get, people like Moses Sumney, who's just this, this colorful exploration of sounds and styles and this big, artistic vision. And then you also have people who are just like, I have, like Lyric on Twitch. He doesn't use Facecam. All he does is stream the game, and he'll have like 60,000 people watch his stream on a daily basis. And it's like, that's crazy. Like, who would have thought that? Like, he's literally not showing his face, but he still has a connection with his audience because of how he, just interacts with people.
Well, I think if you go toward that, like the higher end production quality or whatever, you can't go back,
Yep.
Like, I think you're better off a little bit lo-fi and trying to build up an audience there. Like, and I think that's at least for me, that's been an artistic goal, I guess, is to not do it with Flash, but try to, like, and of course I'm, in my somewhere around 50-ish and am not a household name, but, like, I have, people who know my work, or have seen me here or there or heard something before and may not even know my name, but, see me at the grocery store. Like, I know that guy from somewhere, he was in it. And, I like to think that hopefully it's when they see that it's hey, I like that band. Whoever it was he was playing with, I like that group. That's sort of the ultra lo-fi approach where you don't really have a social media presence. You haven't figured out all this, all the technology, and you just keep sort of chugging along and trying to do good stuff, For me, like, having to post something more often than like once a year is a little scary, like, I want to post one thing once a year and have it be like an album.
Right.
So yeah, it's tough to navigate, and I don't want to sound like one of these over the hill. I can't figure out dang technology.
Who's got a TikTok?
Yeah. What are you talking about? Twitch? That was a band, and
Right.
It just hasn't I don't produce that way,
Right.
Everything for me is I don't know. It's a weird maybe a generational thing. But then again, there's a lot of people my age who are, or, somewhere in the between 30 and 50 who seem to be able to do just in the last few months, a few people I know and really respect have come out with albums and have had album release parties and big shows, with a lot of people there and everything. And I'm like, oh wait, I should have done that. Maybe it's COVID, the whole hard stop on things. Some of us went into a little bit of hibernation. For me, it was creative hibernation. I did a lot of stuff, but very much isolated, and I think somebody else with more of that, the technological skill or the social media interest, would have been just getting stuff out there all the time. I did do I don't know, I'm sitting here making it sound like I'm, completely isolated. I had a YouTube channel, have one. In 2001, I was putting out a bunch of silly videos.
Oh, nice.
Called Jay Gavan Goes Mobile ... phone. I was making recording myself playing a bunch of instruments and doing some editing, in Adobe, figuring out how to use that as an excuse for I need to learn how to make videos, partly for teaching. All the teaching went online. So I'm I need to be able to do what you're doing now, record yourself or, record yourself talking into your phone, but then put graphics up, information and, slides and images and that sort of thing. And so I kind of taught myself how to do that by making silly videos and then started making better ones for my classes. But I guess I was for a while, kind of throwing those up on YouTube. I don't know that, very many people saw them. It's probably one of those algorithm things you're talking about. If I had a crew of people who would take them and figure out how to get them in front of eyes, then there might be more people who know who I am.
Right. Well, it's always tricky too with it's you get to a point where you need a team or you need support, but then you're also you have to do enough of the work up front to understand how to delegate the work so that you're not, having too many people influence or change things. If it's oh yeah, if you present it this way, it'll look cool, but then, some comment might change, I don't know, how you enjoy even looking at the final product.
Right. Yeah. It'd be fun though to have a staff, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a bunch of people hey, I got 3 people. I got Kramer on Seinfeld, remember? And you had I don't know if you ever watched Seinfeld, you had the intern. Oh, yeah. He was just pressing his shirts for him and, running out to do some shopping or, that'd be great. I probably is a reality for a lot of wealthy people, but
right.
Yeah, if I had them, I'd have them I'd record something and then say, here, figure out how to get this into people's ears, and here, figure out how to get this video in front of people. I just lost you.
Oh, sorry, I'm getting a call.
My face is really red.
Sorry.
That's okay.
It should still be recording since you're in the thing.
Good. You probably got me doing some adjusting my makeup.
Yeah, I took off my glasses because I'm using a ring light, and it's just reflecting in the glasses.
Oh, right. Yeah, I don't have anything, so
yeah.
You're on such a little screen. I need
the little window. Well, and yeah, the I don't know. You probably know Max Brown, the guitar player.
Totally.
Yeah,
Shredder,
guitar, bass. Yeah, Shredder.
Shredder on pedal steel.
Right.
Have you seen him play pedal steel?
Yeah, some of those clips are going. He's just learning so quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, all his covers of where he plays along with incredible saxophone solo by Coltrane or something, and he'll play it note for note on the guitar.
Yeah.
And then it's the same thing with the Twitch thing. Who has 6 hours in their day to watch somebody game? Max Brown somehow has 6 hours in his day to do really phenomenal musical somersaults. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, and I saw his post and the War and Treaties post about how they got signed to UMG, and I'm curious with what support is that? Because that's it's one of the biggest conglomerates. So there's thousands of people that work for this company. But they were already signed to William Morris, in terms of booking. So I'm curious, with UMG, it's okay, that's more of the recording label side of it versus the touring side of it. But I'm sure both entities influence each other, and and just planning out a route for an artist like that at that level. Because it's I don't see Michael and Tanya, sitting at a computer sending out emails. There's a whole team of people who, with that name attached, all they have to do is just be like, hey, we're William Morris Entertainment. This is our band. We're trying to route through this. What dates you have available? There's less, there's less having to prove to a stranger that this is, someone you want to take seriously, versus, Earth Radio's we've grown a lot in our 5 years, coming up 5 years as a band. And that, this summer schedule we have is evidence of just the work we've put in. Also the reputation, just how we conduct ourselves as professionals, how we sound on stage, it's this combination of efforts. But it must be so interesting to kind of have a big bulldozer like William Morris and UMG just being nope, you're booking them here. They're doing a slot on a late night show. They're playing in, overseas.
So. Hey man, this is maybe not directly related, but have you seen the new George Carlin?
I've seen promo. I want to see it.
But it just debuted Friday night, and I watched the first episode, first couple hours of it. It's really good. But there's a point in there where they talk about Carlin's wife, Brenda, who for 5 or 6 years, in the late 60s when he was doing the hippy dippy, weatherman and all that stuff. She was his booking agent and his whatever, you know, social media, his press assistant. She did, like, they were a team. And then when he got big and he got signed and, you know, started recording those albums and stuff, they like literally pushed her aside. Like, you know, she didn't have anything to do. And then they had a kid and all this stuff, you know. It's like, I wonder if that happens to some people where they, you know, they're self-managing, doing all their own booking and all their own scheduling and stuff. If you take that next step up, you know, and don't have to do all that, like, what do you do with all that extra time, you know, and like, I think maybe that's where a lot of, you know, hopefully not for War and Treaty. I'm sure this is not going to happen for them, but
right.
Like Carlin and his wife and maybe others in the past, you know, with all that extra time and, you know, they found ways to get in trouble and like,
right.
find coke habits and whatever. So,
right. Yeah.
yeah. But, yeah, that's so much. And that's back to like what, listening to that interview with Patty, you know, I just like, I don't, you know, I personally, I think about all the things I'd have to give up in order to do that, you know, because it would take so much time. And it just, I don't know that it's ever gotten to a point in my life where I felt like it was worth it. I've always, you know, I've sat around going, man, I wish I had more gigs and, you know, wish I was playing more. And, you know, I'm playing in like 6 bands right now, but none of them have very many bookings, and maybe I should do more of that booking. And then I start to think about like, oh, you know, this is the level of work that I'm trying to talk myself into. And I don't know if I have time for it or the love
yeah.
for it, you know? So, yeah, kudos to them to get to that, you know, level and to you. And I know like when I was in the Red Sea Pedestrians, you know, I don't know if you know that
nice.
band. I know, you know, Ian and
oh yeah,
probably some of the guys. You know, that band started out as a, you know, I was one of the founding members, and it was like 4 or 5 years before we got to that point where, you know, the name recognition and you know, that stuff started to pay off, where it wasn't a slog anymore. And most of that is due to Ian Gorman, who, you know, runs La Luna Recording now, but, you know, his networking made all of that possible for us, I think, and allowed some of the rest of us to, you know, be able to like just show up for the gigs and rehearsals and write music and not, you know, and be able to keep our day jobs and but it's just, you know, even then, like, I was very aware that this small amount of success we're having right now is due to a monumental amount of work by this one guy, you know, of emails and communications. And yeah, it's just a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. The year I got started, you know, 2017 was where I really like, because I had booked gigs here and there at Grand Valley and, you know, a little bit at Western. But a lot of the stuff I was getting was, you know, I was in Hannah Rose's band, the Gravetones, for a while. And like, you know, I was playing with Brad Fritcher, like a, you know, jazz trumpet player. And so I was known as like a sideman or like, you know, a person you could hire just for whatever. And I would, you know, school events, jazz gigs, Gravestones gigs, none of which I was, you know, actively like, you know, sending out emails. So 2017 was, I got linked up with Olivia Vargas. My piano teacher at Grand Valley taught for a little bit at Aquinas, and she was a student of his, and she plays in a band called August. They're like a soul pop band. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they throw cool rock and other fun stuff into their sound. But at the time, you know, Olivia was just at Aquinas. This little band was just getting started. They needed someone to book. So I was like, okay, I guess I could help with that. That sounds like something I should know how to do. And then the following year, I spent a year working with Mark Lavengood. He has his, Bearmark Productions thing. I don't really know if it's like just like a separate entity. I know it could be attached to events. It could be attached to, I don't know, as a sponsor. But he was trying to build out, his kind of talent agency. And I spent a year, since I already played with them, I spent a year just soliciting, sending hundreds of emails, probably, I imagine, over that year of just like, he would say like, oh, I want to try and go to Colorado. And it's like, all right, let's look everywhere in like what venues are in Colorado, what cities is he trying to go to, what bands can we, reach out to see if they want to co-bill. And yeah, just that by itself was like, oh, this is a ton of work just to like, just to say hi to someone and hope they respond and then follow up with them. And then, nothing is a no. It's just a delayed yes or a redirect of the yes to a different opportunity. Like, oh, we can't join your festival, but I see you book these fall events, or you're the talent buyer for this brewery. Like, it was always that like combination of just like overwhelmingly send out a bunch of emails to a bunch of places, and then, whoever responds, like try and build some sort of rapport to where like, even if nothing comes of it, there's still a person who knows who you are. And if you reach out to them again, maybe they have the budget or the opening or something. But
yeah, I ran I owned a business called Kal-Tone for a while, which is still around right down by La Luna.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm no longer a part of it, but while we were there, we had a little listening room called the Sandbox, and I was doing like a couple shows a month for a while. And they're real small, like the seating capacity in the room was like 35 or 40, it was really small shows, but we could do them. It was a great sounding room, and you could basically play acoustic. Vocalists could be, unmiked or barely mic'd.
Wow.
Really nice thing. But we put, in order to sell tickets to it and everything, there was a link on the website, and things were getting out there. The word was getting out there. And I started to get so many emails from bands from all over the country. Like, just, I could tell that they were, sort of formula, like they sent out the same email to, hundreds of different locations. But I also knew, like, I started to think about, like, I can't book this band, but man, they took this time to write this email to me. Like, I'm going to, I know how much work that is, so I'm going to write them back something nice. And then after a while, I started to realize, that's probably the wrong tack, because I just gave them more time, more work, because they got a positive response from me. And so they're going to like try to follow up. And whereas I probably should have just said, nope. and then I could go, okay, I could delete that one and not waste any more time on it. But yeah, that's a great example of the, since we're on to the slog of trying to be a performer in the creeping up on mid 21st century here. It's really hard. It's really hard. And especially like, well, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, it's like, it's hard enough to reach out, and then, every person on the planet has a different relationship with music. So some people, they crave a certain style. Other people, they need, like they go to 4 shows a year, but the tickets are $300 and it's in an arena. And like, some people, they don't engage with their local scene at all. And then they go to like the 2 festivals in their state or something that they have time for in the summer. So it's like trying with each ask, like, will they understand what we're doing? What, have we presented ourselves in a way that makes sense? I tend to use a lot of, I have different canned response templates that I edit, depending on like, okay, I have reached out to this person before. I have a rapport, or like, oh, this person's in Traverse City and they know this person. So let's make sure that I bridge that connection, just to, just some little tiny foot in the door.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were saying.
Well, so imagine me, not to bring it around to my current work, but
Sure,
hey,
no,
I'm a not too well known name, but a person, a sideman in a lot of different groups who's just done a really weird album that's kind of about ancient Greece. Want to hire me? I almost have to just, like my approach to doing, kind of solo work is like to tie it in with, oh, I'm in this, a Zeppelin cover band. Why don't you hire us? And then I'll open.
Right.
Right. Because I think there's crossover there. People might like it, but, it's just, there's some things, some musical acts that are just really hard to book cold in a place in a different town, and it's probably where that the networking thing, like the more people you play with as a side person, or the more people you meet in a variety of ways, the more likely they're going to help you put a word in with some booking agent or some venue manager and say, hey, you should, this will be a good show. But it's really hard to unless you have, like I said, a Zeppelin cover band, gypsy jazz, Django thing, like those are easy to talk about and to describe. It's like a quartet. We play instrumental. I'm also in a surf rock group, and that's pretty easy. People know kind of what they're going to get, something in the ballpark of what they're going to get with a surf band. And, but doing, kind of an original thing or, that's hard. That's really hard. Like, I haven't figured it out yet how to do it. I think some people, again, like what you're talking about with Earth Radio or with Patty, or with any number of groups that are doing original music and touring, that's, an astounding level of work that's led up to that ability. So kudos.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Well, and with your album, as I was listening to it and reviewing it,
thanks for that. Great review. I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. In my head, it was like, because I love history, and I listen to a lot of the podcasts I listen to, they deal with either history or looking at like, how society now is shaped by the past and, parallels and or people who, maybe it's in politics or in certain avenues, they're repackaging old ideas with new language, or they sanitize it with academia speak. But it's as I was listening to it, it's fun to think about like how to present that could be, it could be a very grandiose thing you do like 4 times a year as like a big event of like, oh, there's a full band. There's, maybe accompanying media and lights and, it's a parallel of, modern times told through the story of ancient Greece, but it's also touching on like, all these different styles of rock. And it's, it's a fun like idea for a concept album and for, putting together some sort of, I thought of that especially because I just played with Elijah Russ on his double album release show. He spent 2 years, crafting 2 different albums. And, that band, it was like a 16-piece band. And it was just this cool, we were all there to support Elijah, obviously, but it was kind of a community celebration of like, oh, look at all these singers and different players. And so that, thinking about your album as like, there's the potential, at the most extreme case, you could have like a cool full production thing, which, would be a ton of work, or at the, at the normal level, it's still this like, there's storytelling in it, and, audiences love a good story. So
yeah, I've been trying to work on like a sort of a solo performance of not the, of course not the whole album, but of some of that, and then tying it in with some of my earlier, discography, I guess.
Sure.
Just playing some small clubs, but again, like I'm rusty at that because it's been a few years. And I think normally, like pre-COVID, I totally would have recorded this with others. Like I did this on my own in kind of isolation. I would have recorded it in probably at La Luna with Ian and gotten a bunch of other people involved. And by the time it was done, would have had the energy and the people around me to put together a real show and that sort of thing. But this was such a different animal. And, I really, other than Mike Roach, who mastered it for me, before he mastered it, no one really had heard it or been involved with it at all, And, so I'm still like feeling like, well, I'm going to spend this year kind of trying to get it into people's hands and have people listen to it. And then maybe toward the end of this year, I'll try to do some sort of belated album release show and maybe do a weekend tour or something. But I'm, that's still kind of just a nugget of an idea.
Right.
It's a big project, that's another thing, like just finding the right, whether it's 16 people or something more modest, like, 6 or 7, even getting 6 or 7 people, and trying to find 3 dates in the next 6 months where all of them are available to practice.
Yep.
Is almost impossible. I mentioned that I play in a Zeppelin cover band called Zed Zeppelin. We're trying to find a date for a gig in September. And there's one of those, one of the guys sent out a doodle, and everybody put in their date. And after the doodle, there was 1 date left that everybody was able to do, like out of 50 possible dates.
Right.
So, there you go. It's, but yeah, hopefully to do something like that. And it can be, I don't know. I always imagine it would have been great to see. I'm a big Jesus Christ Superstar fan, and
oh, sure.
That that started as an album, or basically a concept album. And I would have loved to seen just like the band that performed that British recording with Ian Gillan, as Jesus, and like that would have been so awesome to just see as a staged rock show, without costumes, without anything. I just want to see the band perform the music, because like all the stage performances of it, I think they're cool. I saw one where like, the high priests were all like in Nazi garb, and and then there's like the movie version where they're, it's hippies, and that always kind of takes away from the music a little bit for me. Like you're focusing on the set and not listening to that awesome bass bass line the bass player is playing, over that song. So yeah, I hope to do it'd be great to stage this album as just a rock performance, and I hope to do that at some time. But it'd take some people, because there's a lot of different, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll need a good organ player. You know one?
Yeah, I know a few.
Yeah. I played all the keys on the album myself, and the whole time I'm thinking, man, I don't know who I want to hear this. They're all going to be like, who's playing those keys? Yeah, it's not my, I'm passable at finding chords and writing a part and figuring it out and playing it once. And then, right now I don't think I could play most of the album.
Right.
I'd have to relearn, okay, how did I do that part?
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's fun for me as a keyboard player to see, with Earth Radio, we're now that, David Ward's joined the group, and we have, this new quartet foundation, and we're feeling good about how things are going. We have new stuff written and recorded, but it was kind of along the same lines of how we did the previous albums, where there were, band members brought songs, skeletons, and then people developed them. So for me, over the last few years, to see if it was a blind taste test or something, where I was sight reading or, listening to someone playing through their song, it's okay, I know this is a Justin tune because there's a lot of, triad pairs, and then a mix of chromaticism and interesting bass pairings with chords, because he's a bass player.
Yeah.
And so when he wrote our song "Wrong Tree," it started as a piano thing, and so it's oh, I know his vocabulary more because of that. And then with Hannah, it's okay, she writes a lot at the piano and sings, and a lot of what she does is a mixture of parallel movement. She'll do a lot of major 7 movement or minor 7 movement. And then she's really the only one in the band. I mean, Justin's done it a couple times, but she's the only one in the band that'll have a lot of diminished chords. She'll use a lot of, diminished chords to lead up to the next, leading tone type stuff.
Sure.
And, dipping into more functional harmony in that way. So yeah, I love usually when it's played, I love when non-keyboardists or people who have keyboard as a second instrument play things, because I'm so used to my approach that it's nice to see how other people treat the same instrument when it's not their main focus. Although sometimes I get, if people are writing for piano, especially, modern classical people, they're can you play this? And I'm I don't have 20 fingers.
Right.
There's no way for me to, I could cluster some in thumbs, and I could maybe cluster with my pinkies, but I only have 10 fingers.
Right. I think most of the stuff, when I needed to record a keyboard part that had 2 hands, I'd record 1 hand at a time. I don't need, nobody's watching, nobody's going to know.
Right.
In fact, there's one of those iPhone videos I did. What song was it? I did a cover of Gotta Get Up by Harry Nilsson. Gotta get up, gotta get out, and it starts with ding, 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 bom, bom, ding, 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 ding. And I kept screwing that up. So I'm no, this will be funny. I'll record myself doing the right hand over here, and another video I'm going to. So it's, it's just two of me, each with a right hand and then the left hand. Like, but really that starts with the necessity of not being very good or coordinated. But yeah, like, I think probably my approach to that is like the keyboard and organ especially are so great at like creating, like you talked about, a diminished chord going into like a change into a new part. For me, it's like a volume swell, you know, or like when you kick on the Leslie, right, as you're moving into the next part, and you know, and being able to like record, say you've got a piece you're working on that's got, you know, a scratch guitar and a scratch vocal, and maybe you've done like the bass line or whatever. And like I would start experimenting with organ, and it would kind of give me that idea of how much I want to like emphasize the change from verse to chorus or back or whatever, and how that would work. Like, it was really a fun, because I haven't, you know, in all my other, everything I've ever recorded before, I've gotten somebody else to do that, you know, and usually they're like, you give them a demo or show them the song, and then they come up with a part, you know, but to use it as a writing tool and as an arranging tool almost, was really a fun thing for me on this, messing around with this record. And then like trying to like mimic some things like the Farfisa sound, you know, like,
oh yeah,
light bulb on one song where I'm like, I want this to be, I can't tell what I want it to be. And then like I stumbled on the Farfisa sound on this keyboard I'm using, and it's like, that's it, you know, like, and then it was one note, you know, like,
yeah,
that's all I can do. And sometimes there's, nice little accidents like that. Or there's one song on the record that I wanted to sound like, I tried to actually copy, not the song, but the recording technique of She's Gone by Daryl Hall and John Oates. You know that song?
Yeah, I know the song. I don't know the background.
I just love it. I'm like, I want it to have this feel. And so I was listening really close, you know, in headphones. I'm like, okay, they've got the organ, you know, sort of a light organ panned hard right, and they've got, you know, an electric piano panned hard left. And so I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. My song's totally different, but that's the like sonic universe I want it to. And I don't think I mean, people are I'm used to hearing and to panning guitars right and left and placing them in an audio environment. But it was really fun to like, oh, I don't need to put 3 or 4 guitars here. I'm going to have electric piano over there, and, you know, and that'll fill it down. So. Yeah, love it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and like that's one thing I feel like I've grown a lot in terms of how I listen to recordings, because of, you know, when Earth Raider's in the studio, we all have input on the production side of it, but kind of the de facto producer is Justin. You know, he's got really big ears, and he's really good at like, you know, just encouraging like what if we, you know, had the piano mic'd, but it's running through this pedal chain, and then we sample that portion of it and stretch it for this, you know, like just trying different ways to color a song. But in also, you know, it's like a lot of what we do as a band, you know, we'll show each other different music, and then we're, you know, commenting on like, oh, we had the production or the writing, or, you know, if we know some of the personnel involved on the record, you know, like Yeba is a singer that's, you know, been really popular. Well, it's weird, like popular, but also still new. Like her debut album came out very recently, you know, within the last year, and the record, you know, you look at it's like James Francis, incredible jazz musician and arranger, Pino Palladino, Questlove, Mark Ronson, like all, you know, this industry titans just behind this incredible singer, which, you know, she's like 27 and just has a really, really great voice. But even prior to that, you know, her work with PJ Morton and, you know, other artists kind of got her name out there. But it's like knowing all the elements of how a thing is made just helps you, like, you know, even, you know, with your thing, like listening to that She's Gone and being like, I don't know yet what makes this sound the thing I want to, you know, emulate. Uh-huh. But, you know, those little tricks of like, oh, it sounds this way because of how stuff's placed, or and I see the trend, you know, a small trend emerging of like the 360 audio, you know, some people putting that on Spotify, and I'm like, I've never thought about hearing things up here.
Yeah.
So it's fun to play around with that.
Do you have to have, like, I mean, can you do that with stereo, or is it different?
Yeah. I mean, I've listened to some of it with, like, you know, studio headphones, and I notice a little bit of, like, I can at least hear, like, some of the movement, but I think you do need, like, you know, like almost like a surround sound setup, or like a theater full of immersive audio, you know, stuff.
Well, it's funny though, because, you know, if we're trying to mimic what you hear with your ears, you can tell when something's coming from up there. So it seems like they should be able to turn that into a stereo reset. Yeah.
Right.
I'm way out of my pay grade right now. So
yeah, it's, well, and it I don't know. It's interesting too to see the mix of like you can hear some of the trends. You know, I think of like people who do like synthwave or retro wave. You know, they're pulling from like the 80s, but they're using some of that equipment. But there's also equipment, you know, like Roland. Everyone likes the Juno. You know, the Juno 106 or the Jupiter, like all these, you know, iconic synths that have been used on a bunch of recordings. And Roland was like, okay, we'll make, you know, boutique versions that are like $300. And now you have this whole generation of people who can't, you know, like a Juno 106, even broken, could still be $1,200. And like a Jupiter is probably, you know, 3 times, 4 times that, maybe more. I don't know. It depends. But, you know, now you have these boutique things that are like $300, $400, easier to get access to, that have a lot of those same synth engines. Or you get, you know, something that I want, which is the Roland System 8, which is like a synth that has all of that architecture from the Juno and the Jupiter and a bunch of knobs to, like, you know, sculpt your tone instead of, you know, digital sub-menus. So there's this interesting bridging of the past while also developing, I don't know, like new techniques and equipment. And, you know, you can have people tour with like a Kemper amp profiler and just plug into a cabinet and then run it through the PA. And then you have people like Eric Johnson, who, you know, he toured, I think it was the same album, you know, Cliffs of Dover came out. It was like an anniversary tour of like one of his more iconic albums. But he was talking about the process of like having to, like, you know, he was trying to recreate those sounds with newer equipment that was easier to tour with, and he just wasn't getting the same feeling or the same tones. So he had to dig out all of his old gear, you know, like hand fastened to like old pieces of wood and like old pedal boards. And he had his tech, like, you know, make sure everything was working. And he's touring with this rig from like the 80s. And so it's interesting to see all the different approaches that can happen.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of old school versus new school, and like, what are you gonna? I just discovered an amp that I really love. That's the Fender Pro Junior, which is like 8 watt little box, you know. And I think the reason I love it, I mean, it sounds good and it's got great tone and everything, but I can carry it so easily, and it's like fits everywhere, just love it. Right now, my pedal rack is like weighs twice as much as the amp. Where but I've never loved the modeling stuff. Never and I don't know why, I think it probably all sounds good, but there's just something about them, something old, or something that has an old design.
Right. Yeah. And
feels right.
Well, and as much as I in a perfect world where I have just, I can walk into any store and buy anything, I don't know necessarily, I definitely want a Nord or, something with a lot of utility. But I've grown up, my rig's getting fixed by, whenever he can get to it because he's so busy, Jim Alfredson. Mm-hmm. And it's a Yamaha CP33, which, my parents and my grandparents bought me in ninth grade when we got rid of our upright piano and I still needed something to practice on, but also, it could be used for gigs. And it's, the weighted action is great. The piano sounds decent. The Rhodes is nice. There's some other instruments that I sometimes use, but there's not a lot of sounds. It has MIDI, it has USB, so you can connect it to a lot of stuff. And I gigged with that, all through the Gravetones. I didn't really buy any extra equipment. I just was all right, I can crank up the digital reverb if I need it. I can use the pitch bender to mimic a guitar or mimic or just practice that flavor. And then I ended up getting a micro Korg, and that became I have a 2 keyboard setup. But then, I was I could just chain this keyboard to the micro Korg and then control all of the sounds and blend them just with the one keyboard. And from there it was okay, but I want, I see other people using effects pedals. I kind of want to dip my feet into that. And now I have, a little pedal board with different sounds, and it's building out, it's building up to a chord workstation or a motif where there's thousands of options, but in increments that I can understand the chain. I can understand the, what tools I have and what things I really need or what things I want, versus getting, something as intimidating as a chord workstation. And you're I don't know even where to start. So, yeah,
it's funny. I played at a gig last weekend with Guitar Up, which is my surf band, and
nice.
And I kind of recently upgraded my pedal board, and I got this Strymon reverb tremolo pedal that's probably the most I've spent ever on a piece of gear that wasn't in a guitar, and got that set up and take it to the gig. And the gig was, we were under a tent, but the pedal rig was in the sun, and it must have hit the pedal because it just went, it's kaput, and it was doing this thing that was sending a signal through everything. So I had to unplug it and just rely on my, luckily I brought my other amp with a built-in reverb. It's kind of a Princeton model. And, I go through the whole show, and we played for almost 3 hours, and at the end, I'm man, I didn't use a single pedal. Brought this huge rig, and the only thing I used was the reverb coming from the amp. I could have just brought the amp and plugged straight into it. I maybe I used the tuner, but I don't even think I was using that because the light, the light shines on that, and you can't see the. So yeah, sometimes I think I don't know how this works for keys. You've got so many different options there, but sometimes with guitar, the best thing is to have few options and need to be able to get the different tones and get the different feel just with your hands, and and your tone roll off or whatever. So that's kind of nice. But it's easy to do when, you're really just going for a clean, reverbed surf tone, maybe not if you're a cover band, Need like, I saw these kids, one of the Kalamazoo Academy of Rock, we just had a bunch of shows. It's an organization I direct bands for, and one of the bands the other day played Dreams by Fleetwood Mac.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to shout out to Annabelle first. Annabelle played that solo just with this incredible sounding, she just nailed the sound. It's got it's like a reverse, not a reverse delay, but almost like a pedal that does a volume swell for you,
Yeah.
It just sounded great. It's 15-year-old who's got a better understanding of pedals and how to mimic tones than I do.
Right.
Some of those kids, they're so great at figuring out tones. It's surprising. They're all like teenagers, and they come in and they've got these great pedal rigs, and I'm like, wow, you don't need all those pedals. And then I hear them and I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds great. And maybe it's COVID. Maybe they all had a lot of extra time at home to sit around and tinker with pedals and figure it out.
Yeah, and that made me think of two things with, being, succinct with gear and shaping your tone from your instrument. And then also kind of the new generation of people thinking of how to, get sound out of their instrument and what equipment they use. Krongbin, their rig rundown that they did with Premier Guitar, it's always so funny to me because, usually you get oh, we're here with Tosin Abasi from the, this progressive metal band, and he's got, this elaborate setup and stereo amping with side fills and all these things that inform how he plays, and his guitar is this he has his own guitar line that just, I don't know if you're familiar with Tosin. He's one of those dudes that's I first heard about him just, he was in metal bands, and I'm like, okay, he's, great player, sweeping and playing really fast. But now he's kind of built Animals as Leaders is it's a trio, and it's 2 8-string guitars and a drummer. And I recently saw them in April. They have, tracks and other things that they orchestrate, and it fills out some of the music. Uh-huh. But it's watching them, it's like a master class in different guitar techniques, because they'll go, they'll have classical technique, really intricate finger style, that have really aggressive, rock and metal styles. Tosin kind of adopted the Victor Wooten thumping technique and is able to do really percussive, fast groupings of notes. Same thing with his selective picking, where he'll build oh, I want to play a sextuplet, but he'll do pick and then hammer on and then pick, he's almost like economy picking, but he's just creating this motion that uses both of his hands rather than relying on only hammering on or only picking. But that's at the extreme end. So when I saw Karanbin, they're a trio, and a lot of their music's, mellow and there's a lot of atmosphere to it. His rig was oh, I got a Mexican Stratocaster, 2006. I haven't changed the strings. And the pedal board's oh, I have a wah pedal, and the wah is always down for a filter unless I need to actually have the wah sound. And then he has a reverb that's always on, and then I think a Strymon Flint for delay swells and 1 or 2 other pedals. And then like a certain Fender amp and then a backup of the amp. And, you know, all the tone between the hip hop or the, you know, the tone of like African guitar, like the drier, more like,
Yeah.
you know, the bright sounding stuff, that's all just tone shaping and his picking, or like his, you know, how he's playing, which, you know, I thought was really cool. And then the much shorter story, the new generation of people. I worked with a band, I'm trying to remember their name, but they were a duo. There's a woman on drums and a guitarist, and they're from Ypsilanti. The guitarist's rig was like, he had a pedal board, but everything was like, it was fed through his iPad, and there was an app that he could like digitally route his audio signal to different other multi-effects. And it, you know, coming out of the iPad, I was like, oh, is it going to be like super compressed and like hard to mix? But it was really like full bodied and beefy, and like, you know, you wouldn't have even thought it was from an iPad. So it's really interesting to see like people, you know, there's so many options for tools,
Right.
like how they explore it.
When I was a kid, when I first started playing, I had my brother, basically my brother, I'd say I helped him, but he built a bass out of a piece of plywood and a neck he had found, like literally found in a dumpster in downtown Allegan, and a bass neck, and like managed to get a pickup somewhere and like and a bridge for it, and put together this bass. And I would play that. I figured out a way to play that through a Sanyo tape deck that had tiny little speakers. This is like, yeah. And so it sounded like, instead of boom, it sounded like ding, 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 you know, like there's just almost nothing there, but at least there was some volume, and I could play along with cassettes. Yeah, you know, like, but that was, you know, sometimes you make the most of you know, whatever you got, and the less. Is kind of how I feel about this, like this last recording project I did. I kind of limited myself to, I'm only going to record, you know, what I can do, and with the instruments I have access to in this room, you know, in the Academy of Rock place where I would retreat to every night. And that, and, you know, I have a couple of mics. They're not good ones, you know, but that's what I'm going to use. And I've got, you know, this Scarlett interface, and I use Adobe Audition instead of like, you know, I know everybody uses like Pro Tools and,
oh, right.
and better rigs, but like that's the one I had for free because I was using Premiere Pro, you know, for video, and yeah, and just like limiting myself in those ways, you know, I think like had a great effect on the creative side, you know, instead of the opposite, you know, like it didn't limit. Right. It just meant, well, you know, I'm going to, and even like I wouldn't let myself, or probably because I'm not good at like programming beats or anything. So I used a few like synthesized like percussion sounds off the keyboard, but I literally played them, you know, like you could hear some like concert bass drum sounds occasionally, boom, you know, and that's me pushing the button with headphones, you know, recording this.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. I enjoy that part of it, you know. I think I've seen, you know, some other guitarists who without, especially like running a guitar shop, and I worked for Heritage Guitar for a long time. So I've seen a lot of people who are guitar buyers and collectors who are really into, you know, pickups and amps and pedals and tone and all that stuff. And they, you know, that's their main focus. And then you see them play and, you know, like you go, oh, that's the problem, is you're not like that good. You need to practice. Right. Or like the actual playing, and then you'll, you know, you want to sound like Jimmy Page, use a Dan Electro guitar going straight into a small watt amp, and you can get the Page sound, not, a $5,000 Les Paul copy with just the right Marshall or whatever. And
right.
It's the being able to play that song, and so I don't know. I feel like, again, back to like me playing keyboards on, that was sort of a limitation thing. Like I couldn't, after a while, I'm like, I'm the only one who's working on this. So I got to play the keyboard parts. And so I'm limited, and I know I'm limited, but I'm still going to try to make sounds with this thing. And hopefully they're not like distracting, awful sounds. Hopefully they like fit the vibe of the recording, but I'm going to use what I got. So.
Right. That's all you can really do. That's like, I think about, because I have an office at Third Coast Recording Company, and that's in Grand Haven. And, there's so many like ideas that can come from like what happens when you have access to like, every mic you could think of, or like 7 different guitars, or, there's 2 different organs with 4 different Leslie options. It's like, there's so many things. But I find myself like, I start with like, what's familiar, like what's something I know I can easily pull up and do. And then, all right, what's the expanded version of that? Like, if I'm used to, an organ sound on my keyboard, like how do I then translate that, not necessarily like matching the tone, but like, a completely different instrument. Like what do I do with when I have access to that kind of equipment?
Right.
It's yeah.
That's the thing. Like studios are for probably a lot of musicians have gone into the studio and went, wow, I could do this or that, and then pretty soon they've like spent their whole budget and they've got half a song recorded, because they really wanted to use the reverb tank or whatever,
Right.
Yeah, I think, maybe another thing for me that made it easy to not worry so much about like getting, I don't think the album sounds bad, but I definitely can tell that it was not a pro production. And I'm sure you can, and I'm sure other people can. But I feel like that's not the with some productions, some albums, some recordings, that's the goal, is to get like the best sounding thing in the world, and maybe to do that you need to stretch your, take that organ sound that you're familiar with and the Leslie you're familiar with and stretch it into something else that nobody's ever heard before. But like with this record, it was more like that stuff is helpful, but I'm really trying to tell this other story, that's a little more,
right.
That's more the goal. I'm talking about the Peloponnesian War, and that's not going to be made any better or worse if I have the or worst Leslie sound or the greatest guitar tone ever. I'm hoping people will pick up on the message, like
right.
Makes sense. And I think maybe that's coming too from, I mentioned Jesus Christ Superstar before, that they recently remastered it or remixed it, original, and it sounds way better, but the version I grew up listening to was really kind of an awful production. We're not like, you have 2 characters singing off one another, and one would come in and it's really close mic'd and, a dead sound. And then you hear, Judas comes in and he sounds like he's on the other side of the room, with a fan blowing, whatever. And but I like, I grew up with that kind of thing. I kind of enjoy those sort of lo-fi production qualities in some way. So I wasn't like trying to make my record sound lo-fi. I was just working with what I had and what, my abilities, but also kind of grew to like, what I was hearing and
right.
The way it was sounding and the way it was feeling. And it felt like it had the right sound quality for the story I was trying to tell. So, and that's part of it too. Sometimes you're, when you're trying to find the right tone on your organ, you're also thinking about the song. What's gonna be the best service for this song that I'm working on? That's always the first, I think.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm sure, that I'm not. You work at Third Coast Recording. Anything you haven't thought about before?
No. Yeah, but I think it's an important message too for people who think, because I do see it a lot with I don't know, guitar players, especially metal, where like that extreme of guitar playing and the genre, there are a lot of albums that sound like 10,000 feet tall, and it's because of the production, and trying to recreate that live is always tricky. But some people think and you mentioned earlier too, it's they spend thousands of dollars on the gear thinking that that's how the sound is achieved, or that's how the song is written. It's no, you got to start from your personal musicianship. The song's got to be there, succinctly. You can't just, kind of half tilt go in with a song and then expect, the symphony to come out if you're not putting care up front to the, the seed of it, because it's a great vision for songwriting combined with just solid playing, however it is recorded. That's way easier to mix and produce than having to pitch correct things and, reamp, not for fun, but reamp because this, this tone's not really there. It's more important to come in with a strong, playing and songwriting ability versus oh, we'll fix it in post, that joke of.
Sure. Well, that was this last project for me, working on it by myself. One of the positives was I could tinker on a guitar part or a keyboard part or drum sound or whatever for weeks,
right.
Not obsessively, but I wasn't on the clock, and it wasn't, a matter of reamping this thing and, trying this other thing to see if it sounds any better isn't going to cost me any money. Or, if I just I don't like this sound or this tone, or I didn't play it right, I can go back tomorrow night and, and redo it. And that's something where if you're going into the studio, I think you really, like you said, you have to have the song ready to go. That's what's going to get you is the quality performance, and not the post production. Can't polish that turd,
Right. Yeah. Well, I think, overall, I expressed it in the review. I thought it was a well put together album, and, as someone, like I mentioned, I'm a big fan of history, and, even in high school, I had a teacher, I don't remember his first name, but it was Mr. Van Ink. I think it was Pete Van Ink. And he was known as the teacher that, you're gonna learn a lot, but you're also gonna get, a mountain of homework. And if you looked at my class grade, it'd be okay, he passed, but it wasn't he was, it wasn't A plus. But then, I took the AP US history test and got a 5. So I was oh, okay, I am retaining.
Yeah.
I'm learning, and so being able to like have both of those interests engaged in a record without it feeling like there wasn't a point where I lost the plot or like didn't, even if I didn't know the super detailed specifics, I could still get the overall conflict and how it related to the music, and so I thought it was great.
Thanks. I teach history, and I'm not a big fan of how people say they're good at history or they're not good at history, and I don't know about your teacher, but I had teachers in high school who were like, the way to be good at history is to memorize these 100 facts, and regurgitate them for a test, and then you pass the class. And for most people, like that's something that is really difficult for them, and they forget it. You're just engaging that part of the brain that helps you remember something for a few minutes until you take the test, and then you forget about it. But I think, I always tell my students, like, when I was a kid, phone numbers, for instance, if you wanted to call your friends, you needed to memorize their phone numbers and dial it, on the actual phone device. And the way, like, usage is what sort of creates, memory. And sometimes it's just, I think a lot of people get more out of history just by talking about it and by by getting things wrong. Like, nobody needs to, if you listen to my record or you're just having a conversation about ancient Greek history, you don't need to know the dates of the Peloponnesian War, right? Not to understand why it's important, like it, or maybe it isn't. You might even find out that it's not important to you. In this context, I was just saying that it is a similar, like, I started working on this project right after the January 6th, the riots in Washington D.C. and that kind of angled I was already thinking about, I want to do something with some history to it and maybe Greece, and then that made me think of how basically the Greek city-states, destroyed themselves by fighting with one another, instead of like feeling like they had, that things were in common between them. Instead, they had, civil war and strife that ended up being turned into like what we have now with this Democrat-Republican thing where, we don't even remember. It's like the Hatfields and the McCoys, we don't remember what we're fighting about, but there's no way we can get along. And when you do that, eventually, it undermines your whole thing. And that's why, like, the album starts with Collapse, it's kind of, and I go on not be like super depressing, like this is all a story of depressing end of civilization stuff, but it's just talking about it. I'd rather like find some humor in sort of comparing things today with things back in ancient Greece than write a song, at least right now, write a song about my life and how I'm dealing with the modern world or whatever,
Right.
Like, I mean, people, there have been people like me all through history who have been living in a time where there was strife and where people weren't always getting along. And they said a bunch of stuff too, and let's look back at what they had to say. And so that's all I was doing. And, I'm glad, like, if you found like can find like the chronological, like a story in it, that's great. And I hope other people will like just find little nuggets of, hey, that sounds funny, I wonder what that is. I'm gonna Google it, whatever. And more than anything, I think it was something that helped me just like focus some some nervous energy, like a lot of people had, being sort of cooped up and not being able to play gigs. I lost, but like a lot of people, like all my face-to-face things I did were just gone for a couple of years there. And so I needed to keep myself occupied, and it was almost like recording this stuff was a way to do that. Yeah. So now, and bringing it out and like dumping it on the world, I hope some other people find some enjoyment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you about it, it super helps because, I've been like earlier in our conversation, I've never been good at just like going on social media, Facebook, whatever, and saying, "Hey, this is the thing I've done. Check it out and love it." It's much easier to have a conversation with somebody else about this stuff generally, and then say, "Oh, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to go get it, you can go to Bandcamp and whatever."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I hope this podcast, helps and
thanks.
And
sure will.
Yeah. And I appreciate the conversation we had, and yeah, it's great to know more about your background. And of course, being in West Michigan, we have a lot of similar, like, oh, we know these people or we've done some of these. So yeah, it's always nice just connecting in that way.
Totally. Yeah. I hope to be playing in GR again soon. Like we had kind of Guitar Up had a great run there at Tip Top. It seemed like every few months we were playing at Tip Top, and then COVID.
Yep. And then COVID.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll be up there again soon. Yeah. Haven't played at Founders in a long time either.
Yeah, they're only just getting, because I used to work there, and it's like they're only just getting some, thrown together version of what they had. Like they don't have a team. They have some people who used to work there being contracted to do sound, and then they have an employee who's still there kind of dipping his toes into talent buying.
Yeah.
So we'll see, in the next 5 years how things shape up, but it's an interesting time to have like, a venue that grew to such a, important prominence for the community, kind of have, weird missteps, but then weird, I don't know, this disconnect between like the larger, obviously it's a beer company, so they're focused on that more than growing the venue, but then the venue is informing the culture, and the culture is buying the beer. It's like you would think there would have been like, oh, we could do music, and the doors are wide open. It's more nuanced.
I forgot that there was some weird like stuff that went down there. I'm just thinking about like the places I've played in Grand Rapids before the pandemic. And,
right. Yeah. No, it's fine. Yeah, I worked there, so I lived through those things. And, but yeah, I'll definitely keep an eye out for the groups you mentioned. And you mentioned you can get the album on Bandcamp, I know for sure. Is that just jgavan.bandcamp.com?
Or Bandcamp/Jay Gavan, or however that works. I think if you type Jay Gavan, and look for this. See my on there. Look, I've got the original artwork.
Wow.
I don't know if you could see, but it's like literally scotch taped together.
And wow. Yeah, like a collage.
Yeah, collage. And I took a photo on this table. I don't know if you can see. Black table I'm sitting at, just with my phone, just like that. That's how I got the album cover.
Wow.
And I copied, like, most of the stuff on this is from an old Rolling Stone magazine and a couple of National Geographic maps. So I know that's going to trigger like some history buff in you. I have like a file of National Geographic maps that I saved, and they're great. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. Bandcamp, and I hope I can get out and do some sort of playing with this record soon. Like I said, if it's not a full band kind of thing, then I might try to get around and do some solo performances. But yeah, hope people enjoy
Awesome.
it. Yeah, thanks, man. I hope to see you around here again soon. Earth Radio or any other combo. Let me know.
Yeah, I'll keep you posted. And yeah, enjoy the rest of, I don't know, your week, your summer, all the things.
Yeah, man, likewise.
Yeah. I'm going to go pack up some stuff and move things to my new place, at least some of it, not all of it today.
You're moving?
Yeah, I'm moving to just another part of Grand Rapids. And, with an old high school friend, and she works from home, so it's, easy for me to be like, hey, you're around, but can I move some stuff?
Uh-huh.
So I'm taking advantage of it today before I have something every evening, Monday through Sunday this week. And, most of it's in GR, but then there's like a couple dates in Ohio and then a couple dates up north. And so I'm just running around.
Yeah. Well, good luck.
Thanks.
Break a leg at all of it.
Yeah, great chatting.
Yeah. See you soon.
See ya.
Jay Gavan, everybody. So I didn't address it at the beginning, but I was filming this in my room. As you can tell, things are all over the place. Got some rearranging to do, and cleaning and painting and all sorts of things. I want to make this room a little bit more cozy. But I appreciate y'all for checking out the episode. Again, patreon.com/DutcherSnedeker, DutcherSnedeker.com if you want to see everything else. You can follow me on socials. Go look up Jay Gavan, look up what he's up to, follow Guitar Up, look at all the different things that he's involved in. I'll put links in the description like I normally do. Glad y'all could finally hear it after so many months of just not being able to find time to edit it and just being burnt out and just all sorts of things getting in the way of being able to just do these things. So I appreciate your patience. I hope you enjoy the new schedule too, twice a month, more time to sink into these interviews and enjoy, the conversations. Maybe you learn something, maybe you find out something new that you want to share with others. But either way, happy to be back doing Mitten Backstage. And we'll see you in the next episode where we're going to chat with some more Michigan artists. Got some interviews lined up, a couple that I've already taped as well. So stay tuned for more episodes.